On Houndsman XP podcast this week, we're going to South Africa, and we are going leopard hunting with a professional hunter from South Africa. Gavin Lipjes joins me on the podcast, and we have a great talk. We could almost call this Chris's Easter egg hunt, and you're going to get the full idea of that when this podcast starts rolling. Before we get there, I want to bring you up to date on a few legislative issues that are going on, and I can tell you that the hottest topic in the land is bear hunting in Vermont. Those folks still need our help. We have got houndsmen on the ground in Vermont that are posting all of the information and updates on the Houndsman XP podcast group page on Facebook. You get all the contact information you need to reach out and come to the aid of our Vermont houndsmen. We've got some legislators who are extremely uninformed, talking about something that they know nothing about, nothing new in the political arena, and it's up to us to inform them and educate them. But some of these guys are taking this thing and twisting it around, and Vermont is asking for our help. Reach out. Check out the Houndsman XP podcast group page and get all that information right there. Montana Bill 468. Montana Bill 468 is coming out of committee, and it's going to the Senate floor, and we're going to continue to track that for you. But this thing is looking really good for us. So, but don't go to sleep on this thing. Keep that pressure on. Just if you've already email the same people again and ask for an update. Let them know that you're watching and keep the pressure on that way. So you can follow Terry Zink on Facebook. He's keeping everybody up to date on that. Montana State Houndsman Association is posting updates on their groups as well. So make sure you're not asleep at the switch. It's no time for complacency. We've got a lot of work to do. I also want to give a shout out to all of our patrons on Patreon that are sponsoring this show. I can't tell you how much that means to us, and you guys are absolutely shareholders in this show. We love to hear from you. We want to hear from you, so make sure you're reaching out to us and getting involved in this podcast. This is our voice to stand united, bridge gaps in the hunting community, and secure our future. So preserve, protect, and promote. You can join a very good group of houndsmen on Patreon and become a shareholder in this podcast. And you can do that for as little as $1 per show. You can go to our website, click on our Patreon or support the podcast, and it will take you to our Patreon page, and it'll give you clear instructions on how you can become involved in that. Monthly drawings, you get discount codes from our sponsors, a lot of good stuff there, and it helps us continue this podcast, give you these legislative updates, be your voice for all things hound hunting across the globe. So, guys, I'm really excited about this podcast, about this interview. I was really excited the first time I did it. I messed it up. You'll hear that story. And you're going to enjoy this. So I'd say it's time to get rolling. Time to dump the box. When I was a kid, I clearly remember when I was just a young lad, and the community had an Easter egg hunt. And we all went down to Donner Park, and there was always a special golden egg that you were trying to find when we went on this Easter egg hunt. And I remember standing on that line, and they said go. And the reason you're trying to find this golden egg is because it had a gift certificate in it for a shopping spree at a local retail store that had all kinds of toys. So all these kids are running madly across Donner Park trying to find the golden egg. And I remember this just like it was yesterday. And I may But they say go, and so I'm just running across the yard looking for the golden egg, and I was missing all of the other eggs along the way. And I remember getting to the other side of the park and turning around, and a kid behind me actually found the golden egg. And I thought, how did I run past that? And that's exactly what this podcast, when we recorded it last week, was like. You had so many gems, so many golden eggs in that thing that I was missing all of it. So that's why we are recording this episode again. And I was just amazed. I was enthralled by all the information you had, where you're hunting. Gavin, I'm just going to turn it over to you. Introduce yourself for our Houndsman XP audience.
All right, so I'm a South African native, born South African. I come from a Dutch heritage, a Dutch descent. So my surname Lipjes, that's directly Dutch. My mother's side has traces back to the Isle of Man as well, so a little bit of a mixed breed. But we have a strong history in South Africa. I've hunted pretty much all of Southern Africa, a lot around the world as well, but obviously based all my efforts in Southern Africa. So that's from East Coast right across to the West Coast and as high as Zambia. So I suppose your listeners would need to get maybe a little bit familiar with that Southern African map, but it's quite a large area.
That's okay. We need a little history or a little lesson on world geography here, because I can tell you, after we started talking, I dug mine out and started looking, and it kind of expands your mind a little bit. I like gaining knowledge. I learned the difference between Zimbabwe and South Africa and where all that was located. So how'd you land in Australia?
Well, my wife has wanted a safer, more long-term, secure base for our family for many years. So she was on the farm with me close on 10 years, and it was a constant theme. And if you have a bit of foresight, at least at this point now in the South African political spectrum and the economic spectrum, it doesn't hold a lot of positivity, not a lot of long-term positivity. So when our first son was born, we have 3 children. When our first son was born, then it really started to ring true in my mind. I'd sort of kept that on the side, like, all right, well, if things really get bad, we've got an out. And but then when he was born, then it became a lot more clearer that we probably need to set this base up now while we're still at the particular age we were, and while we still had the energy. And it was also at that point that my hunting was running well. So I was close to the peak there. So it lined up nicely. Australia is a great choice for South Africans because the lifestyle is very similar, the climate is very similar, sports are quite similar, language is very similar. So it's not a major culture shock. Obviously, it is a different country and different people, but it's not a massive shock. So we can acclimatize fairly easily in Australia coming from South Africa.
Yeah. But the thing that really drew us together was the fact that you're a houndsman from South Africa, and you reached out to me in a way that I made a mistake in the first sending podcast and had some information switched around there, and you reached out to me and talked to me about it, and I thought, this guy's done his homework. He's somebody that we need to talk to, and so you're a professional hunter from South Africa, and explain what a professional hunter is.
So a professional hunter is somebody that is licensed by the state. You complete a particular course, and you have to do a theoretical and a practical examination of a period of a few weeks. That's in the country South Africa itself. It does vary throughout Southern Africa. Zimbabwe, you have to serve a 2-year apprenticeship, so it can be more stringent dependent on where you are. But so a professional hunter, someone who's licensed by the state, they need to have an intricate knowledge of all game, the full understanding of the greater ecology. They need to be very well versed with all the ordinances and the legislation around hunting and conservation and game management. Need a good 4x4, a good pair of boots, physically fit and healthy, a good rifle, and a good encyclopedia of naughty jokes.
Yeah. We don't want to put an explicit label on this podcast, so we'll leave those on the sideline. We'll pick those up in later conversations.
Yeah, no, that normally happens around the campfire late in the evening.
That's great. You know, one thing I've always noticed about watching, and my own experience with professional hunters in South Africa or anywhere in Africa, is it just seems like there is such an awareness of what your client needs to be doing, and it doesn't come across as ever being degrading or, you know, if I'm a seasoned hunter, but the professional hunter is there. It's like standing right beside you. I've never shot. I've never taken a leopard or an elephant, for that matter, you know, any of that type of game. But the professional hunter is in your pocket, and he's saying, okay, here he comes. Shoot again. Put another one, you know, shoot again. And that is so different than my experience as a hunter that usually doesn't use guides. So professional it sounds very professional, and I compare that to somebody that is in a military type situation. You know, that's the enemy. There you go. But it's not. You guys are so much deeper into that. You're talking about conservation. You know the game. You know all these things about, I'm a stranger in a strange land, and you are there to guide me through that, keep me alive, and you're an advisor. You're a paid advisor as much as anything.
That's exactly right. And there's a couple of things that you said there that have real relevance. So one of them, you said that military framework. What we found in the general professional hunting, and even in the game ranching and the conservation industry, is a lot of ex-military people have a tendency to migrate to that as a career after leaving the military. In South Africa itself has a fairly recent war, so that just ended like around the late 80s, a border war against communism, fought in northern Namibia and in Angola. Those are two other things for your listeners to have a look at in the map, and a bit of that history. But yes, so a lot of the industry is populated by ex-military individuals. I am not, but many are. So that theme, that kind of basis, who that person is quite common. Then the next thing was the guiding part.
Before we move on, let me clarify what I said real quick, because I don't want anybody to think that I'm, you know, putting hunting into warfare type stuff. I'm talking about the calmness that a professional hunter brings to a world of chaos. That's what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
The professional hunter's ability to, I mean, every video, and I can hear it in your voice, yeah, this is chaotic, but keep your cool. Because there's stuff there that will hurt you, kill you. And I really appreciate the part of that professional hunter, professional. You've been there, you've done that.
Exactly right. And so what you find is, as you mature in this, so your kind of need to control the situation, or even to maybe constantly advise the client, declines. You allow that vehicle sort of to drive itself more as you mature into this and understand those parameters and have a greater in-depth control over it, security over it. So that experience for the paying hunter, the traveling hunter, becomes more of his own. When you're young, you're sort of following the textbook a little bit, you're following all the advice, you've sat around the camps, you don't really know exactly. You got the right characteristics for most part, but you still got to feel it out for yourself. And I suppose that's in anything. But yes, as you mature, as you get that experience and the time, and once you've been charged many times by lions and faced many elephant charges, and then understand what that all means, then the experience for the client, for the hunting tourist, becomes more his own.
Well, I'm not going to allow you to take me on that Easter egg hunt again, because there are a lot of rabbit paths off of what you just said. But I mean, there's so many gems in what you just said. I know you're going to use a term that has been miscommunicated to the world abroad. And you're going to use a term called trophy hunting in this podcast. And
Yes.
I want to get, it's one of those terms that is very familiar to a person that goes to South Africa, but then is misconstrued or, perverted and twisted in cultures around the world. So I want to slay the dragon in the room and talk about trophy hunting and what it means to you as a professional hunter and what it means to the culture in South Africa.
I think we have a very clear understanding of, or at least collectively, we would in Southern Africa think of trophy hunting as the person that is trying to achieve the extraordinary, the above average, the trying to complete the more challenging task, the more difficult hunt. So to step out into the veld and shoot a kudu is not incredibly difficult, but to step out and to shoot a particular aged bull that will measure between 50 and 60 inches is a feat, is a task. You need to spend a lot of time up and down many mountains. To take a true trophy leopard could be several trips to Africa to achieve that. And trophies are defined by scoring, but that's sort of like just a guide, because we need to categorize things. We need to classify things to understand where it enters and where, at what level it is. It's a lot of people refer to the inch tape and how that ruins it, but you got to step aside from the inch tape and not worry so much about that, more about the fact that that particular animal is not the standard and the norm. It's the above average. And the people that pursue that are are making a greater challenge for themselves. It's more difficult. It takes more time, more effort, more knowledge, more miles traveled, more money invested, more patience, more self-restraint. It is more difficult than shooting something for meat. And obviously, we hunters. We're not talking that there's something wrong with meat hunting by any means. It's just that's the definition of trophy hunting. The person that wants to go that extra mile, that wants that special animal. And sometimes it's not necessarily the animal that has, the buffalo that has the widest spread. It could be a buffalo that has a really worn old boss with one broken curl, and that may be a trophy to that particular hunter. But you're not going to replicate that again very easily. You could spend another lifetime waiting for that. Taking a 7-year-old plus male leopard that's held a territory, that's passed on his genetics, from a conservation perspective, you're comfortable that those genetics are in the ecology of that, at least that local ecology, and to remove him has next to zero impact on the greater population. But the benefit of that to conservation is massive, because those dollars is what funds the maintenance, the preservation of that wild land. And it's extensive.
Before we get into the economical benefits, I think the message to the broad-based public is, it's easy. Trophy hunting is easy. You drive down the road, you shoot this big animal, you cut its head off, you hang it on the wall. But what you're saying is, it is a dedication at a level that is above that. It has been cheapened we've allowed it to be cheapened. The anti-hunting culture has exploited that term to the point that even among the hunting community, we're like, well, I'm not a trophy hunter. But what you're saying is the level of dedication that it takes to achieve that goal is so far exceeding anything else, besides the economic value. I mean, when somebody comes to South Africa to hunt and they want to harvest the most majestic animal that they can find, they aren't just, it's not a chip shot. It's not a chip shot for them.
They may pass hundreds of other animals before they choose on taking that particular one. They may return several times. They may also get lucky, and that's also just part of it. They might step out of the lodge, jump into the vehicle with their professional hunter, and a few miles down the track, there stands a 60-inch kudu bull, and wow, what a lucky day. Good for you. But in terms of being the norm, you can't count on that.
I'd rather be lucky than good, Gavin.
Yeah.
I'd rather be lucky than good. Go ahead.
Yeah. So
get into that economic benefit. Talk about what trophy hunting really means to South Africans, the people on the ground that are living there.
All right. So when you get deep into the hunting, when it's deep as a passion for any person around the world, any country around the world, when it becomes deep and it becomes part of your lifestyle, who you are, and you have the means to travel around the world, it's not like that you're only going to go take that set of horns and then come home with it. It's the full experience. It's the going to the place. It's seeing the the very rural basic economies, meeting those people, contributing to maybe the development of schools around it, water holes, boreholes, helping with anti-malaria, combating malaria. It's very diverse. So the contribution of international hunters, of traveling hunters, primarily is those dollars allow for outfits. So there's a difference between an outfit and a professional hunter. An outfit is the man with the land, the man with the permits, the man that has the lease or owns the land, and controls the offtake, either by quota or by self-imposed quota, government quota or self-imposed quota. But so that's the outfitter, and he's a business. And in order to maintain that land, he needs a particular level of stock, and that's only achieved through good conservation practices. So having international hunters come in and pay to be there means that his business allows to continue, and in turn he is protecting all that land, like a shop store owner would make sure nobody is pinching the stock that he has, or damaging the stock, or destroying the infrastructure. Or as he's protecting that, so is that outfitter protecting his area, and it's done most effectively with the most advanced conservation practices and principles. But the whole machine needs dollars. It needs to be funded somehow. It needs the anti-poaching units need to earn a salary. They need fuel in their vehicles. They need ammunition. They need a helicopter. The lodge staff need to be paid. You understand? So the take away the trophy hunter, and you hamstring conservation significantly, fundamentally.
So what happens to this land? I mean, because describe the two-part question. So describe the area that you were actually outfitting, or I'm sorry, being a professional hunter for your outfitter in, and then describe what would happen to that land if there was not international hunting, or, it's a soft term for trophy hunting.
So I work predominantly with one outfit in Mozambique, the country Mozambique, which is on the eastern coast of South Africa, Southern Africa. Mashamba and Zo Safaris, Grant Taylor is the outfitter there. And he has numerous concessions throughout, numerous hunting concessions is what we term it, because Mozambique, you cannot own land. You can only get a 99-year lease. Government owns all land. So longest term you can't get a title deed, 99-year lease. So he has numerous concessions throughout Mozambique, central right up to northern Mozambique. So that's all big game country, and that's all unfenced, wild, true Africa. There'd be small villages of indigenous people, of native people throughout those concessions. It's not like it's an area that's void of people. It's not fenced and there's just animals inside. It is a natural a system, but it's literally millions of acres, and that one outfit is responsible for that. That one man at the end of the day is responsible for millions and millions of acres.
That's amazing. I mean, you're talking, how big is it? You're talking millions of acres. We're talking 2 million. We're talking 10 million. Give us some perspective here.
So just the one concession that is north of the Zambezi River, very close to the Kohora Bassa Lake, which is a man-made dam or man-made lake. So there's a hydroelectric plant there, built or backed up on a big wall, a big dam wall. So that one particular concession that's north of that is 1 1.5 million acres.
That's as big as the Salmon Chalice National Forest in Idaho. You know, and that'll give us some perspective back here in the States for our Western hunters. That's amazing. And so that's one. How many more are there? He has
at least 7 camps. They're not all as large. There's a smaller camp that's right coastal on the forest, Mwanza, and that's probably only about 200,000 acres, but it's still a critical area.
Only.
It's just south of the Zambezi Delta. And that's where we do a lot of the leopard, and we do a lot of the darting and collaring and that, because it's coastal forest and the cat's tree high, because the trees are tall, you know, sand forest. So it does make for easier working from that perspective. But he's got concessions up in northern Mozambique, south of the Zambezi River. It does depend also where you want your species. So close to the river is where you're going to get your crocodile and your hippo, and there they would have many hundreds of miles of river frontage that you'd be able to do that on. So it's a variety of habitat, all with their own unique different conservation perspectives, and always the human pressure. Not cities backing onto them, but there's still the demand for there's still a forestry demand, a legal logging demand. There's still obviously the bushmeat trade, where there's organized poaching. It's like an organized poaching syndicates that'll go in and pay people to hunt game illegally and bring the meat in. There's ivory poachers and smugglers. It's diverse what walls what they have to combat, and then the knowledge that's needed to be able to manage those from a conservation perspective. So a riverine habitat is very different to a conservation perspective on what a savanna habitat would be, or a coastal forest would be. You need to understand the ecologies.
So you spit out a lot of information right there, and again, going back to that Easter egg hunt analogy, I'm going to avoid running for the finish line here.
Mm-hmm.
What have you got for like the next 4 weeks when we can really drill down into all those different gems that you've given us? I mean, you're talking about ecology. You're talking about, I'm not going to take the bait, Gavin. We got to keep this hound focused. We're going to keep this hound focused for now, but man, there is so much. It's so complex. The issues that you're talking about are so complex and just deserve a lot more conversation. And let's draw this back into
anti-hunting rhetoric and that anti-hunting propaganda. Their understanding of what the playing field is so childish, is so minor. So they haven't even scratched the surface, but they condemn it.
I mean, you're talking about illegal mining, and you're talking about illegal timber harvest and ivory trade and all this other stuff. And I mean, it's just laying out there, and I just want to pick it up and run with it and talk about it and all this other stuff. But this is a Houndsman XP podcast, so I'm going to stay focused today.
Good
and all right, so I can see a long-standing relationship here, and you being a regular guest on the Houndsman XP podcast.
Very good.
I called you about leopard hunting.
Cool.
I called you about leopard hunting, and but before we get to leopard hunting, you're a houndsman, and you're a houndsman first. you struck me as that guy that's a houndsman first. There is something about the connection between the hound and the professional hunter that has drawn that common bond and drawn you into that side of it.
It bit deep, it buried in my heart, and there's just no turning back from that. Once you hear the voice of the hounds, once you see them grinding their nose and their tails wagging, I don't know what it is. Sitting in the back of the pickup with them lying on you, and I don't know what it is. It's just a very deep connection, and that's it. Once it's done, that's it. It's done. So yes, I specialize in hound hunts, and that's been my niche for the past 20 odd years, 22 years. So licensed professional hunter, but predominantly a hound hunter, and predominantly for leopard, because that's where the greatest challenge lies. That's a really epic animal, and it's also where you can make a living doing it, which is, a very motivating factor. South Africa itself, especially the Cape, so currently that's the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape in more modern times, but when settlers first arrived, that it was just the Cape Province, and we're talking, back records from the late 18th century, the early 19th, a lot coming out of the mid 19th century. So the colonists that arrived there, the pioneers that arrived there, brought hounds with them, and the area that they were mainly used in was depredation work. And sheep farming in the Cape Province took off, and it was at a time the most important industry in the Cape region. And predation on the sheep by jackal and caracal was something that was actively fought against, and the use of hounds became fundamental in that. So we have a very old history with hound hunting.
Tell us what a caracal is, because I think most people know what a jackal is, but briefly describe a jackal and then describe the caracal.
Right, so your two common crossovers there, a jackal would be, in your terms, a coyote, not exactly, a little bit smaller in fact, but very similar, and a very similar ecology as well, living in pairs, territorial. A caracal would be a crossover to your bobcat, and probably a very similar ecology there. A caracal is a super predator. It's like pound for pound the most effective cat predator in the African environment, on the African continent at least. Very highly successful, very diverse. They can leap high in the air and grab birds in flight. They can survive on very small rodents, and they can take big animals like sheep. They can take natural game the size of a bushbuck. So a very, very effective predator, predominantly solitary and quite cryptic in their movements, so quite crepuscular, early mornings, late afternoons into the evenings, a little bit of a drop in movement over the main course of the night, but in areas where they're pressurized, they're almost entirely nocturnal. So it's a difficult customer to deal with if you're a sheep farmer. And like most predators, easy game, they won't just kill one and consume it. They'll if they get into a flock of sheep, they'll kill as many as possible and just leave the carcasses there. So hated by the early pioneers, and I don't think the relationship has changed much in the few hundred years that livestock agriculture has been in Africa.
Yeah, it sounds very familiar. But so I don't even know where to go after that. I've got an outline in front.
The type of hound that is most.
There you go.
The type of hound that. Sure.
Pick it up, Gavin.
The type of hound that's most commonly used is is similar to the foxhound. So initially that would have been what most arrived on the shores. But even within that, there's other breeds that have come through. There's Welsh hound. There would have been some French influence here and there. There was a whole. South Africa is very diverse in their ethnicity. So people from Germany, from Portugal, from France, from England, from all over, and never mind all the native Africans. So it's a very diverse makeup, and that has influenced the hound. But in terms of how it works and the style that was used is mainly what you could think of as more in terms of your running hound. So from my outsider perspective, and obviously I know very little about American hunting, just just what I get from conversations, watching videos, reading magazines. I've been a subscriber to Full Cry for many years.
But Houndsman XP.
Like sort of maybe like, and Houndsman XP, sorry, I should have said that.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, I have got great insight from this podcast. But yeah, so sort of like those South Texas kind of dogs, those more running dogs. They can tree, but they're not really from true treeing lines. And that has run through up until very modern times. More recently, we've seen a lot more import of Gascons out of France, and black and tans, and red bones, and walkers, and red ticks, and blue ticks, and so much has arrived on our shores, and I hope it keeps going that way, and the guys just keep improving and improving. But in terms of being able to tackle leopard, so we now go for what would be like commonly understood as your, doesn't have to be blue tick, but that kind of makeup. So your like bear hunting blue ticks, that's sort of what they use now, or what we use now for leopard.
For leopard, okay, so we're going to shift gears into leopard. I want you to describe a leopard hunt, and then describe the needs from a hound that you need in a leopard hunt. What are the demands that you're putting on a hound to capture a leopard?
So I think the obvious mental association or cross-reference.
Can I interrupt you real quick? Can I interrupt
Sure.
you just briefly here? So we went from caracal to leopard, but leopard is one of those species that American houndsmen look at it and they see this cat as being, it's an icon in the cat world. So describe the difference, or describe a leopard and what it's like to hunt a leopard in South Africa.
Yes, so very elusive. They are very successful, and they're very widely distributed. So you can find them on the outskirts of towns and even smaller cities. And a very successful predator, very adaptive, and a bad attitude. If you were to look at it in terms of like comparison to a mountain lion, you would not be able to climb up a tree if a leopard is treed there. You couldn't climb up and put a noose around it safely.
Mm-hmm.
They
Because it wants to eat you.
Prone, yes, they are much more prone to attack. Like most animals, they have that fight-flight zone. Once you've entered in that, there's a high probability of a charge and an attack. And so yes, it's a complete different awareness when you approach a tree with a leopard in, as if you were to approach a tree with a caracal in, put it that way, or as if you were to approach a tree with a mountain lion in.
So
you don't just sort of walk up and start taking pictures.
So you talk about fight or flight. they get to the fight level a lot quicker than cats in the North American continent. You know, that is so cool. I've actually climbed a tree with a mountain lion before, and I think it was more done as a prank more than anything, because commonly what happens when you climb a tree with a mountain lion is they release their urine, they release their bladder, and that's always a good time for pictures, you know, when somebody's getting pissed on by a mountain lion. But but leopards, you go climbing a
Might
tree.
be the other way around in the leopard context. And then it's all that wonderful thing about hunting a big cat. It's all that allure of the track. I mean, that's like 90% of it, I think, at least for myself. So that looking for tracks and following them and interpreting all that sign and working out time of passing and distance from where he could possibly be, and what is the pattern of the track show for his current movement, and what could that possibly mean for the direction where he's going. So is he heading into hills, or is he coming out of the hills, and how fast is he walking? And that part of cat hunting, that wonderful part of cat hunting, there's so much information, you know, just in the track. That's a great thing about hunting leopard. And then just the beauty of it, the magnificence of when you actually manage to successfully beat him and catch him.
So you're driving down the road. It sounds very familiar. Yep. You're driving down the road. You've got your hound box in the back. You've got, you know, everything set up there. You see a track on the side of the road. Now talk to me about sign interpretation. What are you looking at when you look at that track and trying to make a determination whether this is a cat that I can catch today, or this is a nice track, but maybe we ought to go down the road and see if we can find something else?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's our starting point. So our starting point is try and get an idea of size. So it's very easy to determine male and female. Anybody that's hunted cats would know that quite easily. So there's quite a big size difference there. So we then refine it. So, all right, yes, we're pretty certain it's a male. If you're not so certain it's a male, you're not hunting it. You know, so definitive it's a male. And now we're trying to get an idea of what we could potentially find at the end of those tracks. So we're measuring width of track, length of that's just the front pad, width of pad, length of pad, including toes, so pad and toes, front spoor. And then we'll measure stride, and we'll do that only when it's at a walking pace, so when it's at a direct transfer, a direct register, so hind foot landing on top of back foot. Then we know that at a true relaxed walking pace, then you can get an idea. So we've got a bit of a template for this, you know, what we're looking for in terms of length and in terms of size. The real trophy discerning at the end is on some visual cues, but we'll get to that at the end. So we work out, yes, okay, potentially this is the cat that we want to take. He could well fall into that range. We try to reel it in by sight as much as possible. So it wouldn't be like we found the track, this looks pretty good, let's put the dogs down. We'll try and close that gap by visual tracking as much as possible, and we get a lot of information while we're doing that as well.
You get out of the truck and you will visually track how far?
Well, we're always doing it in you know, it's never conditions where there's snow come over the track, you know, so it's all dry ground conditions. So it's so the difficulty, maybe we hit some like forested area where there's a lot of leaf cover, then maybe we might take one lead hound and let him show us and then pick him up at the end of that and keep going visually. So it's just the obstacles where we'd put the hound down until we're quite confident we're quite close to the leopard. It can be that there isn't a possibility of doing that. That the terrain for so far is just going to make it impossible. But in the case where it can be, we often just let a tracker go with the radio, sometimes two, especially in lion country. You normally send out two guys just for safety. And they'll take a handheld radio and they'll go as far as it can, and maybe we'll leapfrog forward with the vehicle. Alternatively, it can be that there's a decent road network where you can find a track going into a particular block. You'll get a nice compass bearing of what his predicted travel should be and where he should be coming out. Maybe loop around there, pick up the track on the other side, and keep leapfrogging it that way. And if he hasn't come out of the block, very good chance he's in the block.
Yeah.
It's rare that those blocks are like postage stamp size. It's normally very large areas in themselves. But it can be like in Zimbabwe, an cattle ranching area, and in South Africa and Botswana, an ex-cattle ranching area where the road network really facilitates that, and Namibia as well really facilitates that, and you can leapfrog and get ahead. So in terms of like that cold trailing dog, typically of what is known in the southwest of the States, where you're on the back of a mule or a horse and the dogs just punch it out and punch it out and punch it. That doesn't exist in leopard hunting, really. We're not really ever going to put the dogs down on scent or a track that's much more than about like 12 hours, and typically around 8 hours. So that parameter changes, that requirement in the hound at least.
And you determine that all from sign interpretation, right? You're determining how old that track is based on your sign interpretation. Yes, and
there's a variety of methods that we do that. So we can mechanically engineer that to a sense. We might go in areas where the road network is fairly good and we'll go drag roads. So every afternoon it could be more than one vehicle, and it could be for 3 or 4 hours that each vehicle has to put in because it's large areas, but we'll drag those roads and clear them, and then we know anything after that is X amount of hours.
Yes.
But there are other things, and the more adept you get at tracking, you can start seeing there's particular insects that only have nocturnal movements. If the track is on top of that insect, well, there's a very good chance that happened after whatever time of the morning or of the night. There's other.
You're blowing my mind now. You're way above.
Yeah.
You're talking about.
There's like diurnal species that would only be active, late in the afternoon or through the day, and then stop the activity late in the afternoon, and that'll give you an idea of what time the leopard passed or not. There's many other indications. Weather is a huge one as well. So when was there wind blowing? Was there any precipitation? How hot was the sun? How quick should this track have dried out or not have dried out? Where is it placed? Is it in the shade? There's a lot in track interpretation, and that's just a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother thing. And the native trackers in South Africa, it's not to say that you have to have, be genetically African to be a good tracker, by no means. But it's just a lot of those guys have grown up looking after their father's cattle, and that's been their job for the first 15 years of their sort of, young adult life. And so every day they are in the field, and the newspaper they have to read is the sign, is the bush. So there's no Pokemon games, there's no television, there's no mobile phone, there's not even anyone to have conversation with. So that's sort of how it is. I'm not saying that for everybody, but so sign can tell us a lot about the age of the leopard track. So we can get a lot of information.
What kind of demands are you putting on your hounds? Okay, so you described a leopard, how you locate the leopard. Now, what kind of of realistic expectations are out there for your hounds? What do you expect a hound to do when you put them on a track that you know you can run, and there's a good probability? Because I can only imagine, you've got a guy that's an international hunter, he's a trophy hunter, and he's not out there for a joyride in the bush or the back country of Zimbabwe. He expects some results. So talk to us about what you expect from your hounds in these conditions.
That's right. So the man that's funding the whole deal, the man that's putting up the $30,000 or $40,000 to be there for 2 weeks, expects results because typically that is his background. That's who he is. He didn't achieve that place in life predominantly. You know, some people win the lotto, but generally speaking, that's the kind of characteristic of the person. So they want success. So yes, there is a high professional demand, and then that transfers over to the hounds being of international quality, of international competitiveness. So for a good reference, a really good bear dog would make a really good leopard dog. And when I say a bear dog, that would mean something that you could find that track and put them on, and they would pull in that scent, whether that bear passed 8 hours ago, 12 hours ago, they'd be able to start that track. They'd be able to then move it. They'll then be able to put pressure on the animal that it bays or trees. And we find like about a 50-50 ratio in that. So half of them tree, half of them fight on the ground. Mm-hmm. And the fight on the ground can be a walking fight, or it can be from caves to caves, in and around the boulders and the rocks, up and down the mountains, in very, very dense scrub. They're normally going to the place of their advantage when they're doing the fight. They're familiar with where they are always. I often say to people, so if you are sort of heading home one evening from dinner at a restaurant or a drink at a pub or something, and some suspicious car starts really following you, and then the guys inside start shouting verbal abuse at you, and you've got a good chance that you might wind up in trouble. And you're in your hometown, you know exactly where you're going. Maybe you're going to your friend's house because he's a good backup, or maybe you're going straight to the police station, or maybe you're going straight home because whatever it is, you know what your plan is. It's no different for the leopard. It's not like they don't know. They know exactly where they are, where they want to go, what's going to be their best plan. So they go to the place of their advantage. And then your hounds need to be able to handle that. So physically they need to be able to handle that, and mentally, they must be able to withstand the pressure of that leopard charging them, scratching them, potentially biting them. Just the sound itself is very intimidating. The leopard sounds like if you were to take like a 500 cc and cut the exhaust pipe off and rev it. A leopard is loud and very intimidating.
Is it more intimidating than a lion?
No, a lion's a little bit larger, a little bit louder, and a lion will kill you. A leopard probably won't kill you. It will hurt you.
It'll just bite you real bad.
A serious chance of, it will bite and scratch you that you will remember it for the rest of your life. But a lion could very well kill you.
Right. You sent me a video of a leopard charge off of a bay up, and just the audio file on that thing with the leopard roaring and charging. I mean, literally, I looked at that and I was like, wow. I mean, the hair stood up on the back of my neck. I was like, this is serious business.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And to be in that mix when that cat is making that noise and running from cave to cave, and the hounds are screaming at it, and then it sort of quietens down a little, and then it builds up and it builds up and it builds up, and at its peak, then it'll charge and it'll swat a dog or two and it'll make its gap, and then it'll find its next little standing ground, its next little point, put its ass up into some thorny scrub or something, and then build up, and then it's an incredible experience. It's worth all the hardships and sacrifice.
For sure. The way you describe it, I mean, I think you're spot on. It is comparable for the North American houndsman. It's comparable to a black bear hunt, because bears will do that same thing. They will walk, okay. They will fight. They'll have you have walking bays until they decide that they've found their ground, and then they'll back up in there until the pressure gets too big, and then they'll move out. So perfect analogy, perfect comparison there. To put it in perspective for somebody that's never experienced it. I still want to come and hunt a leopard, though. I got to do that.
And you shall. For sure.
Yeah. So, man, I'm tempted to break into this part on scenting, but I think it's going to be such a long segment, Gavin. I think that you and I should probably save that part for a chapter 2 to the original scenting podcast that I did, and we can develop that concept. But we've been going for quite a long time. I want to talk real quick, and don't feel rushed. I always say that real quick. You take whatever time you want. But, so as South Africans, professional hunter in South Africa, tell us about where your source of hounds are. I think that'll just really fit in well for this introduction chapter to South African hunting. Tell us what the source is for the hounds that you're using over there.
So, as mentioned, we have, I think the base is probably the foxhound you would find in the base history, and then later would have been infusions of American hounds and more recently French hounds on a great extent. We hunt a variety of game with hounds. Mm-hmm. So there's the depredation work, which is the foundation of the history of hunting with leopard, but hunting with hounds. But there's also a lot of kind of sport hunters, guys that are going out and hunting bush pig, and there they want a slight different kind of set of characteristics. So they don't need any treeing sense or any treeing characteristic, but they still want those dogs to be able to stand and keep that pig at bay. So they're voice dogs, they're true hounds, and that bush pig can run for hours and hours and hours and hours. It's not a feral hog; it's a native pig. To the southern African region, there's a variety throughout Africa that are all native, but it's a very, very hardy animal. And again, it's I've hunted feral hogs, not extensively, but I think I've got a bit of an insight. The bush pig is much more hardy, will run much longer, will do a lot more damage to dogs, will not hang around and sort of wait for the human to arrive. They're a tough character.
We're not talking about warthogs here, right? That's a different animal altogether.
Warthogs yes, it's a different animal. Warthogs are very rarely hunted with hounds in a sport hunting sense. They are a diurnal animal. You can get them out on the plains. You can walk and stalk them. There's no real need to use dogs. And the tusks that they possess mean that you will not, if you were to target warthog continuously, you'd be changing your pack weekly.
Right.
They're very, very dangerous, those tusks.
Mm-hmm.
So, warthog, there's no need, but bush pig are nocturnal, very elusive, like thick, dense, mountainous areas, heavy bush, riverine. So so not so easy to come across if you just stalking them. If you're just going to go out and do a walk and stalk. So the use of hounds assists in getting those. Bushbuck, that's a wonderful spiral horn antelope, and they also like the dense cover. They're also solitary, so they're not in herds. They're not walking out on the grasslands. They're not that easy to stalk. There's some environments where it is more possible, some habitat where it is more possible, but a lot of the area where they're hunted with hounds is quite dense, quite thick. It's predominantly in an area, the Eastern Cape of South Africa, and there they're driven hunting. So you'll have the waiting guns, which will be positioned around the head of a valley, and the hounds will be fed into the base of the valley, and the beaters will slowly move forward, not in a big line, not many beaters, not sort of shoulder to shoulder, more handlers of the hounds, but they'll still make a bit of a noise as they're moving through, and then those bush pig will flush, and those are the sport hunting guys then again, and there's a whole culture around that. There's you have to be able to judge the animal when it's passing by you in a few seconds window. You know, you're not invited back if you shoot an immature animal. You're not invited back if you shoot a female. There's a huge culture around that, and that's probably all that's really actively hunted with hounds. There'll be guys that would be chasing baboons and monkeys and all other little things, but it's not really common or institution at all.
Right. Well, it sounds like you just described white-tailed deer hunting in the South with hounds. You just described hog hunting with hounds, bear hunting, lion hunting. You're doing all of the same things in South Africa. It's just a different critter that you're focusing your efforts on. But I think through this conversation, I've realized that it's the same. It's a different critter on steroids. That's been hopped up a little bit. But are you using the same pack of hounds to hunt all of these species, or do you have specialists? Tell us about that.
Yes, you would need different characteristics in your pack to be able to effectively target those different species. And if you just like a jackal caracal pack, they normally combine that. It's very common for those to be combined because typically those guys are doing depredation work. They're getting paid for it by big farming cooperatives or large scale private farmers. And so there'll be big teams that'll be moved out into the veld there. They'll spend 3 weeks doing sort of grid patterns and making sure that they get rid of as many jackal and caracal as possible. But even within that, the caracal leaves less scent, is more cryptic in its movement. Trees will go in and out, will throw backtracks on itself, typical cat behavior. Whereas a jackal, you more need just pressure. You need to just stay behind it, stick on it, stay on it, and eventually jackal will either go to ground, go to rocks, or some cases that run past some guns. It's very rare that they shot. It's normally the dogs that have to catch them. So even within that, there's small characteristical differences. Bush pig and leopard are fairly similar in what you need from your hound there. They're fairly similar. Just you need that treeing and locating sense when you go into the leopard. So bush pig don't know how to climb trees. They went so you don't really ever need that characteristic, but you still need the courage and the determination to stay on that animal until it stops. So there's slight differences there, but there's a lot of crossover. The bushbuck hounds are completely different again. So they are hot scent, running dogs. They need to be highly athletic. They're almost always in very difficult, mountainous, dry conditions, heat conditions. They need to be able to work through the day. They not necessarily the hot part of the day. We find in Africa, and this is almost across the board, and I'm talking winter conditions, that sort of by 11 a.m. in the morning, typically the day is over. You could pick it up late in the afternoon again when the sun goes down a bit, but typically it's just too hot for the dogs to thermoregulate. So normally by that stage it's done. You could creep maybe up into midday if it's a really cool day, but generally not.
Right.
So hardy, heat tolerant.
So it sounds like that. We talked about this. The demands on your hounds vary, and there is always this big debate about what in the States about what makes a bobcat dog, what makes a coyote dog, what makes a hog dog, and I'm glad that you drew those conclusions together and gave us this clear picture on. And you're so well versed in things that go on here in the States, and being able to draw those analogies. Have you ever hunted here?
I have. I've hunted in New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah.
Nice. Well, you know what, Gavin? We could go on for hours. And I intend, if you'll agree to it, I intend to go on for hours with you about this, but in future podcasts. And
sure.
Like I said, I'm like a kid in an Easter egg hunt. My mind's just spinning. I see all these gems to try to pick up, and I got to be focused here. So we need to have future conversations and things like that. But do you have any closing thoughts? Anything for houndsmen across the globe? Because this will go out to houndsmen across the globe. We could go down the conservation path, and that's a whole topic that I'd love to talk about. But man, you guys are just living in a totally different world, and I'm an addict to learning and gathering information and trying to find out what I can transfer into my hounds and things like that. But we can cover some of that ground later. But do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap this particular podcast up?
Yes, I think that probably the biggest thing is patience, taking your time, doing it properly. And I'll probably speak of maybe like from an advisory thing. I'm not sure. Maybe it's because I'm now a father, so it's different. I talk differently now, but
changes perspective, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah. So take your time. This is a thing that matures slowly. It's so deep. It's so intricate. It's an onion. You just keep peeling different layers, and you just keep learning more and more, and it compounds, and there will never be an end to it. Never. And that's the greatest allure of this game that we're in. Is you just there's always more. There's always more. It's the joy part is that iceberg analogy is that above the waterline, the peak is the cat in the tree or the charging leopard or that wonderful thing. But underneath it is all, under the waterline is all the sacrifices, all the miles traveled looking for tracks, is all the cleaning of the kennels, it's all the financial constraints, it's all the bureaucracy, it's all the maintenance, it's all the breeding, it's all the learning, it's all and that's what this really is for 80% of of this lifestyle. So get familiar and happy with that, I guess.
Yeah, what a great summation of this conversation, and the overarching message of Houndsman XP is this is a lifestyle. It's something that if you stop learning, you're cheating yourself. You know, there is no person that can, any seasoned houndsman will tell you that there are other things that they can learn. There are ways that they increase their knowledge. You know, the true houndsmen that I know learn something on every hunt. They learn something about a dog. They learn something about their quarry. They learn something about the landscape they're hunting in. And it's a true, never-ending learning experience. It's a life journey to being a houndsman that we should never give up on. And we owe it to ourselves to continue that path on learning and expanding our knowledge and our experience. And if you think you're there, then you might as well hang up the leash and go take up golf or something like that, because it's over for you. You've cheated yourself. You've cheated yourself.
And personally, that's why I'm so grateful for your podcast, because I think I learn something in every episode. And learning doesn't necessarily have to be this one major life-changing thing. You find even these small little things that you pick up on here and there and here and there suddenly compound, and then, wow, you have this full picture. And at the time that you got that little piece of information, it was just one little color in the bottom corner of that puzzle. So, personally, I'm really grateful for your podcast. Thank you, Chris.
I appreciate that, Gavin. I was thinking about this concept the other day. You know, I've thought about it and tried to define what a houndsman is. You know, you'll hear people. To me, when another guy that hunts with hounds looks at you and say, that guy's a good houndsman, that's saying a lot, you know, and a good houndsman just makes it look smooth and natural and easy. You know, you get out and you see that track. It's not they act like they've been there before. When there is a traumatic injury to a hound, they're not going into a total tailspin. They're like, hey, we know how to fix this, because they've been there, they've done that, and they've internalized it and used it to their advantage to increase their knowledge and their experience. Yeah, it's just a lifelong journey. Can't state it enough.
That's right. There's no shortcuts in this game.
You're right.
You have to walk that road yourself. You have to do it yourself. You have to travel it yourself. You can learn things from literature. You can learn things around the campfire. You can pick up things in video and podcasts, but you still have to walk that road.
You're right. Well, Gavin, I'll tell you what, man. We've got a lot of future. I think we've got a very good future in front of us, and you've got a lot to offer the hound hunting community. I hope you will come back on with us and really drill down into some of the nuances of being a houndsman. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for yours, Chris.
Well, we close this podcast out the same every week. You want to do it for us?
You follow yours, and I'll follow mine.
Yep, that's good enough, buddy. That's good enough. You follow your hounds, I'll follow mine, and we'll get to it next time. Appreciate it, Gavin.
Thanks, Chris.